I'm going to pick a question for us all to kind of throw out some answers to, uh, which is how, if you guys would be so kind as to share, how did you first learn about hip hop or jazz dancing? So, for example, I'll go first to give an example. So, hip hop and jazz dancing, I think, first came into my awareness through probably music videos. I know. On MTV when it played music videos. Your minds are blown, right? um, so I think when I think about those particular dance forms, the first time I probably really saw them was like Janet Jackson music videos that I really admired, and when I was a little kid, and like Paula Abdul, who did a lot of choreography for hip hop and jazz funk in the 90s. Um, and then more recently, I've learned more about doing more modern hip hop styles, both through taking dance classes in studios and also I used to do the dance festival at Skyline College, which we haven't been able to do for obvious reasons for a while, but hope to do again one day. And we invited Spidey to teach breakdance a few of those years, so I would always take those breakdance classes because I just think it's amazing physical form. So that's for me how I experienced those dance forms first. So if you guys want to just throw out how you learned about those dances or how you saw them first, there's no wrong answer here. I'm just getting us talking. Um, does anybody want to volunteer, or should I just go down the line?
I can start if that's
Hey,
fine.
can you pronounce your name for me? I haven't got a chance to learn it yet.
I go by Jacques or Jack, either or is fine by
Oh,
me.
it's you, Jack. Hi.
Yeah.
Your
Hi, sorry.
your Zoom is signed in differently this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's weird.
Well,
I
it's
don't know.
got like a two-part name, so it's got Gate, Gate,
Jediel.
Jadiel, Jadiel Jack.
Yeah.
Okay, hi Jack. Welcome back.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you. The first time I really knew about or learned about hip hop dance was I think through like a bunch of internet culture, just like memes and stuff.
Hmm?
Stuff like dabbing, and then I think there's like several other ones where it's like trending, like when Musically or whatever was like a thing or something,
Yeah.
and then like memes blew up from it. So like I learned a few dances there, and then eventually I became more familiar with it when I watched music videos for like hip hop and stuff.
Great. That's totally the kind of answer I'm looking for. Does anybody else want to volunteer, or I'll just call you down the name order? Adriana. I became aware of hip hop dance going to clubs in the 90s and watching videos. Nice. Jenna. Through YouTubes and other kids. Nice. Daphne, Michelle, yeah, Keon, go for it.
Um, I watched YouTube, this YouTuber named Dietrich. He
Mhm.
was in a famous group called Quest Crew, and they compete in like dancing competitions. Uh, and he hosts a show
Mm.
that paired YouTubers with professional dancers, and they also compete.
That's awesome. Is Quest Crew just the name of the dance company, or is it also part of the
No,
name?
that's the crew's name.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you know? Do you remember the name of the show? If you think of it, please share a link. It would be cool to check it out. Daphne, YouTube. And so, Michelle, did you, when you started dancing, you said that your mom put you into it. Did you go to a studio, or did you learn with family and friends, or how did you learn? And what style did you start with?
So I lived in Ukraine when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
I was a very active little kid, so my mom thought it would be good to put me into dancing. And I don't quite remember what she put me in because I did a lot of stuff. At first, I started with gymnastics, and I think she put me into ballroom dancing, but I hopped around a lot, like between hip hop, contemporary, like all that good stuff. So yeah.
That's awesome. Did you find that there were a lot of hip hop classes available for kids in the Ukraine? I mean, how old were you when you stopped training there?
Um, there were a lot of classes, a lot of different styles for sure. Um, I I don't quite remember. I remember I stopped in doing contemporary dancing there, and then I moved to US and I did ballroom for a while.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Nice. That's exciting. I think that's everybody. So, um, one of the things that we are talking about in last week and this week are how community dances function as a form of activism, and also how they're taught and shared. So, hold on just a second. I'm over here checking out my notes. See what we need to pull up today. So what I want to make sure we talk about in terms of, we have a few points to get touched on. Last week we really talked about appropriation and what does it mean for dancing to, like, how does dancing become a way that a community forms its own sense of self and identity, and why does that happen? And then we vaguely touched on the historical fact of slavery, which, because we're talking about Black vernacular dance, vernacular just means like the common language. Hold on, let me turn on more light in here. I feel like I'm talking to you in the dark. Nobody likes that. There, that's better. I'm here. So did you guys have any questions about that? And if I were to I guess I just want to check in with you guys if you feel like, from the materials we went through last week, if you have a general sense of how slavery happened. 1619 was the beginning of the colonial folks bringing Black people to America, Central America, and then up into especially the southern states. How in New Orleans, the slaves, after some rebellions which were crushed repeatedly, basically could only dance or create percussion on their bodies, or in, for example, Congo Square in New Orleans, where they were allowed to meet one day a week and do their own marketplace. And so the tradition of drumming and dancing that they used to have in Africa came through to America in that way. And also, I think it's really important to think about how slaves from Africa came from many different nations and many different tribes, and often they would be piled onto a ship and not even speak to the same language. And so another reason why percussion and dancing became a sense of unifying identity for these people is because they didn't share a common language. So if you can imagine layering not being able to speak to anyone on top of the tragedy of slavery, but being able to communicate at least emotions like joy or anger through the act of dancing, or connecting to your spirituality by dancing together. Those are the reasons why that movement is so integral to culture, not just for the Black slaves in America. That's pretty true of most dance movements. So if you think about Irish indentured servants came from the UK, they had been starving, and if you have, no money and no possessions and you're working for someone else, what can you do for fun? You can dance, right? So bringing over Morris dances or Irish jigs and starting to teach and share those moves with other people that you're working with is a way of bonding with people, even if you might not speak the same language. And to give you sort of a little wee snapshot of slavery from 1619 to 1865. So we're going to talk about that time period as is really important to the way that we see Black dances, and also the way that we, in the next section, exoticism, that we judge movement of other than white or other than the group that's in power's sort of moral spectrum. So a snapshot of America at that time, the industry was all in the North, but all of that, so we think sometimes when we're making generalized statements about America that the North was like free and didn't participate in slavery, but basically every raw material that was being processed in the factories that were in the North was all being produced in the South. So it's really an overgeneralization to say that the North wasn't dependent upon slavery at that time. There were 4 million slaves, approximately, and they made up a third of the total population of the South. So if you think about the South as being plantation owners and immigrants and descendants of immigrants in the South, up until 1865, about a third of those people were enslaved. And most people did not own hundreds of slaves, right? Just as it is true now, there were a few people who owned the land and who owned plantations and multiple slaves, but actually most people owned 1 or 2 slaves in the South. And one of the reasons why I'm pointing this out now is because it's really part of how we have this great divide, especially in the last decade or so, that's been showing or rising to the surface and becoming more apparent to some of us who weren't thinking about it for a while because we had the privilege of not thinking about it. The difference between being a poor white person in the South, in antebellum South, so pre-Civil War South, and being a slave was manufactured by the slave owners in order to keep those two groups from joining together and rioting. So what happened after the rebellions was that the laws restricted slaves from playing instruments, as we discussed before, but they also made it so that there was more of a difference between poor white workers and slaves in a legal sense. So a poor white worker could play instruments. A poor white worker could gather and have a big church party, but a Black slave could not gather in a big group with a bunch of other slaves because it was not allowed by the Black codes. And so this change in the laws really built in a sense of racism that we still see to this day that separates the two poorest groups in our country, specifically so that slavery could continue happening. And so the poor white people at the time were taught that because of their whiteness, they were more innately worthy, and that slavery was an, quote, necessary evil because the people in power who wanted to own slaves needed everyone to buy into the idea that free slave labor was okay, and they did this by a moral and sort of religiously based, totally made up set of lies that they inculcated into the culture at this time. And so it was culturally believed that slavery was benevolent, that the Black slaves were incapable of reading or achieving higher intellect or treating each other like human beings or being human beings, because that's what the slavery machine, so to speak, needed everyone to believe in order for folks to be able to turn a blind eye to the human torture and death that was happening. So what do you think that kind of brainwashing, essentially, might have meant for an average white person seeing a dance done by a slave that had evolved from Africa? So, like, let's say you're a white person in the South in the time of slavery, and your family does waltzes, ballroom dancing, or maybe some jigs, and you come across some of the community dancing that we saw in um, in the videos this week. What do you think are some of the words? I know this is going to be hard to say. What do you think are some of the words that white people might have said about that dancing? How might it have looked? Let me see if I can pull up a visual aid. But like, can you guys take a risk and throw out some adjectives? Let me pull up 2 pictures. I'll be right back. Go ahead and give it a try. Don't be shy. I know I'm asking you to say some awkward things here.
I'm sorry, just to double check. Can you repeat what you said?
Yes,
What
absolutely.
the prompt was? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you guys to imagine if you had been brought up in white culture. So picture like big hoop skirts, square dancing, waltzing, right? Jigs, polkas. If you had been brought up in that culture and you saw some of the African slaves in Congo Square, like you walked by, doing dances that they had learned in Haiti that have evolved from community dances in Africa, what might be some of the words or adjectives that you think that culture clash? Let's do it the other way around even. Like, what do you think that Black slaves thought about a waltz?
I guess from like the perspective of like Black culture, I guess like from what I remember, I think it's like I wouldn't think that they'd be like nearly as like, oh, we're better than like white people at the time. They'd probably be like, oh wow, that's like really different, like really um what is it, like completely not what like how we dance or something like that. Considering like how diverse they were, I wouldn't think that like they'd be nearly as like weirded out, which like brings me to like what white people would probably think. It's like, oh wow, that's like inappropriate, that's weird, or something like that. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly sort of the path that I am hoping you guys will imagine is I think that's a great point, that if you consider that most African slaves came from a pretty broad set of countries in Africa, that they might have been more used to diversity than the white folks that they ran into when they came to America. That's an interesting point. I'm curious. That would be interesting to dive into more. But certainly, I think you hit the nail on the head that white folks saw African movement as inappropriate, right? Because we know that Western Eurocentric Moors were very anti-hip movement. They were because of the Christian pressure to be asexual, except when you're procreating. Gosh, I have a lot of air quotes today, guys. And so I want us to sort of imagine that a little bit more. I'm going to pop up some videos here. Which one do we want to go to? Let's look at the Indolo Zulu dancers. Here, let me turn on screen sharing. Just because it's so powerful, and these are some of the ones that we're going to look at more and more. Come on, screen share. So when you think about, and we'll take a moment to look at some Western Eurocentric dances as well. But when you think about the way that Western Eurocentric people, many of them very Protestant religious, but in the South there were also lots of Catholics escaping from the Church of England. There is a very hundreds of years old expectation that people deserving respect stand up straight and tall, that they can be still and cold, that even if they're a warrior, like some of the things that you more often saw as fighting tasks would be like fencing, archery, which are still require like an upright and smooth and restrained body. And then if you think about this form of dancing, ooh, sorry, let's turn off those weird suggestions on the side there. It is not those things, right? This is fully embodied. They're using their whole bodies. They are yelling, which I'm not saying at all that white warriors don't yell, but it's very emotive and designed to display strength and be intimidating through its physical prowess. And that is not what high society did in white Western Eurocentric culture. So even though this might be a dance, now these are Zulu dancers, they're holding faux shields and faux, this is a dance that is representing military prowess, right? So of course it would be really intimidating to people who didn't know what was going on, even though these dancers are not going to war right now. They are celebrating their cultural prowess, their training and strength of their warriors. They're not like actually going to war with the people, of course. So let's take another example. Yeah, let's move this around. So the same is even more true of this is a community dance here. And this is Congolese dance, and this is one of the dances that I love to return to talk about how hip movement in African community dance is not necessarily sexual. And yet, for a Western Eurocentric person who has corseted literally, like bound straight their females for a couple hundred years, moving the pelvis is only seen as sexual from the white Eurocentric perspective. And this one is one of my favorite videos as an example because this is definitely like an early version. It will evolve into dance hall, right? And yet in this version of the dance, you can see that there is a community of dancers dancing and singing together. You can hear the audience cheering for them. And then you get like their aunties, like this woman in green coming over, and other slightly older and same age women coming and pressing on their hips in a way that we see in dance hall, like twerking and freaking now. But in this context, it's not about sexuality in anything. If anything, it might be sort of a representation of like helping each other give birth. Which is like just a totally random, so it's a celebration of motherhood and family, not two people getting freaky. But for then and now, I think it's important to recognize the way that that white Eurocentric culture has layered moral expectations and layered moral judgments on top of these dances that aren't necessarily accurate to what their original intention is. And that's sort of the reason why I wanted to start with asking you, where did you learn dances? Like last week we talked about appropriation and how it can cut people out of the economic flow and also make a form of telephone happen, right? So that you might be learning a dance and it might be taught to you in a really different way. So if you were, for example, learning a dance hall dance now in a hip hop class, you would probably be learning what we culturally accept as the way that that dance is, which is that it's usually a dance of courtship. Isn't that a nice way of saying it, right? Where two people are freaking on each other because they're trying to get it on, right? So, but originally those dance movements descended as community dances that were about female bonding. Not all the time. I'm not saying that African dances are never sexual or never courtship dance. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that through the perspective and filter of Western Eurocentric culture, that tends to be the blanket statement that gets written all over the top of it. Does that kind of make sense? Can you guys let me know whether you're following or if I should move on or not? Yes. I see one thumbs up. How are the rest of you guys doing? Am I making sense? Am I not making sense? Cool. All right, groovy. Let me scooch along then. I want to go back to a couple of other videos. So in our first week, we really ended up talking a lot about appropriation, which was great, but we didn't get a lot of video watching done. So let's take a look at some of those videos. Okay.
This is Duke University.
Back to share this. I feel like.
Hi, I'm Tommy DeFrance, a professor of African and African American Studies and Dance here at Duke University. And today I wanted to talk about African American social dances and how they emerged from this sort of trilogy of dance forms that came about in the 19th century. So Black social dances in the Americas, we have to remember, have really had huge influence the world over. And they developed after the Middle Passage when African Americans had to figure out ways to kind of be outside of the controlling eye of the clergy. A lot of these dances were forms that were restricted by white slaveholders who were really only interested in dances that were easily identified as being Christian movement. So there were three kinds of dances that emerged in the 19th century that become very important. And these are buck dances, wing dances, and jigs. So buck dances were forms that were very, very percussive and weighted down into the foot. Buck dances, lots of weight down in the foot, energy. All these dances are about rhythm and percussion. Now, wing dances are really important.
So I'm just going to pause there for a second and bring us back to this. And notice how weighted down into the foot. And now we got the hip section. The dances are here. Look at how the knees are really bent and the pelvises are like lower than they would be if you were standing all the way up. So they're stamping down, right? Their feet are not just like tiptoeing across the earth. All right, let's come back to Dr. France.
Have a lot more kind of visibility in the 20th century and into the 21st century. Wing dances are dances where you literally flap parts of your body like as if they were wings. So these are all the dances that kind of get down here like this with the knees. You might have seen these dances or done some dances like this, but also with the arms. So you see how a wing dance, maybe 150 years later, can become part of maybe popping. The third form that emerged in the 19th century were called jigs. Jigs are dances that had lots and lots of energy and lots of velocity. So jigs, put jig and a wing together, you get something that we might recognize as footwork. Or something we might recognize as a Charleston, or the kid and play. Or if we just go back to the wing, we get something you might have known or heard of as being something like the butterfly. So these dances really have the same kind of root from the 19th century, and that's Black social dances. I'm Tommy DeFrance.
Produced by.
So one of the things that we are going to do in this class is watch a bunch of really awesome videos. And what I'm hoping that you will become braver and braver at doing, because I feel like it's really a question of feeling shy at first. Like, we started acknowledging that appropriation is an issue in our world today. And sometimes that fear of cancel culture can make us shut up. Yeah? But what we need to be brave enough to do is to ask questions and to make guesses. And so I want to really take a moment to start and acknowledge that when we are discussing dance, when we're discussing any kind of art, the way that we do that is to try to describe it and to make a guess or an assumption about what the influences might have been or what the message might be that the dancer is hoping to share with the audience. And that it's okay when you're talking about art to be wrong, and it's okay to make a guess, because if you don't ever take those guesses, we're just going to end up with no new thought, no new material, and probably a lot of silence, or really I'm trying to think of the right word to use, or such general commentary on dance that we don't give it the respect and honor that it deserves. So what I'd like for us to do, each and every one of us in the class, is to gain enough of a comfort level with general words, like simple step words, so that you feel okay to make a guess about describing a dance and saying, this one looks like that one. Yeah? So let's get up. It's 11:30. Let's take 10 minutes and just move a hot second, okay? We're downstairs again today. Dun, dun, dun. I'm gonna move my computer. Let's all stand up. And let's just step back into your space. You don't need a lot of room. We were watching the De France video about buck dances. And those buck and jig dances, the next step that they got to, or the next evolution stage, giant bucket, is generally thought of as tap, which is something that I know a little bit more about than African dance. I am sorry to say I have not studied enough to feel very confident in teaching it, but I can teach you a couple of the tap steps, yes? So first, let's just talk about stomp. The word has an O in it, and so the mnemonic is you're thinking about there not being any weight in it. So everybody can do a stomp. I just want you to stomp each foot. Stomp. Yes. Just stomping my foot down on the ground. Give that a try. And then let's try holding our balance a little bit more. Let's try 4 stomps on let's stand on your left so you can stomp your right leg. 4, 3, 2, 1, and switch. And 4, 3, 2, 1, and switch. And to the side. And to the side. And to the back. Okay, now that was a stomp with an O. There's no weight in your foot. Let's try a stamp. Stamp. It's just a step. Yes? We use a different word for it because step can mean so many different things. Yeah? So stamp, stamp, stamp. And you'll notice how this moves your whole body, right? When you're stamping, you're moving your whole body to put the weight on it. If you were walking, you would technically be stamping with each step. Stamp, 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 stamp. Okay, let's try a brush. So we're going to take the ball of the foot and we're going to just slide it across the floor. And you can brush out and brush in. So let's go ahead and just stand on our left and go out, in, out, in. And you'll notice my thigh is not really moving at all. I'm swinging from the knee down. Try the other side. Okay, I'm going to do 3 and then switch sides. So on the 4th count, I'm going to switch my weight with a stamp. So we're going to go brush 1, brush 2, brush 3, stamp. Brush 1, brush 2, brush 3, stamp. Brush 1, brush 2, brush 3, stamp. A brush 1, brush 2, brush 3, stamp. How about 1 brush, 1 stamp? Then we'll be switching sides right away. Here you go. We'll go brush 1, stamp. Brush 1, stamp. Brush 1, stamp. brush, one, stamp. Same pattern, but let your brushes go to the side. Here you go. Brush, one, stamp. Brush, one, stamp. A brush, one, stamp. A brush, one, stamp. How about front, front, side, side. And get low, but same action. Okay, so far you learned a stomp, a stamp, a brush. And there's a ton more. But what I want to make clear with us just doing that amount of movement is that you can use pretty common language to discuss dance without having to know the technical terms, right? Everybody knows the action word hop or jump or leap, yeah? So it's okay to talk about dance even if you don't have some sort of proper vocabulary. Let's try another action. So I want to give some props to LaTanya Tigner, who is a professor who I met through a Mills College workshop about African vernacular dances, and she now teaches that class and other courses at UC Berkeley. So if you ever get a chance to go check her work out, she's really awesome. But she just did a workshop with us about some of the older community dances and how they turned directly into dances from the 90s and 2000s in hip hop. So let's start with just a really simple rocking step, yeah? So you noticed earlier in our conversation I talked about how some dances are about working, some dances are about war, some community dances are about courtship, yeah? So this is a working dance. Remember, lots of African dances are really grounded, so go ahead and bend your thighs, let them feel nice and strong and spongy and bouncy. And we're gonna step forward and back. So I'm stamping, really not, well, I'm stepping. And I'm just rocking forward and back. Can you get this feeling? And this is from the action of digging, right? It's a farming, digging action. So this is a community dance from Africa that is about work. Yeah? Just see if you can get that feeling. And I'm letting myself turn a little bit so you can see the different sides. And then if you notice, I'm just paddling those arms like they're getting that wing dance look, but not quite. Okay. Now facing towards me, this is your right leg. I'm going to put my weight onto it, step forward, and rock back. So that's the same movement we've been doing. I just have taken that diagonal twist off of it. Yeah, forward and back. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Add a little bounce. Right, left, right, left, right, left. Okay, let's pause for a second. Standing still, bending your knees. Wing those knees. Let's just do that butterfly wing dance. Tootsie roll in the 90s, but we're just going to wing our dance legs for a moment. And then I'd like you to see if you can take the feet from before plus some winging. Yeah, so we'll go right, left, right, left, right, left. And I added a little touch of my right leg back. Touch. So without the winging, I'm still going right, touch left, left, right. Yeah? So if you add that winging, suddenly you're doing the Charleston from the 1920s. And that, if we turn it back sideways, you can really see how it is extended from that digging motion dance. With just an extra toe tap in the back and some winging. Yeah? We can then add, when your leg goes forward, you can add a little hop. Let's try it. We'll go right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. We're going to add a hop. I'm gonna find a little song. Right, left, right, left. It's much more fun with music, right? There we go. It's a bit quicker. when you take this Charleston dance and you slow it down a bit more, then in the 1990s you have the version of it that becomes the kid and play, where you have a partner you hold hands with and you knock your shins together. But otherwise, it's still the Charleston. Yeah. Right, that's our little shake it out for the moment. Bring us back over to the lecture section. So tell me, does that help you guys? I'm gonna on-screen share for a moment. How does that help you kind of understand when we're talking in this class about how steps can be related to each other and evolve into each other? What I mean about that? Yes, no, maybe? And can you think of, well, let me see. I'm going to pull up a video and see if you guys have not that one. Sorry, this one. Do you guys have thoughts about what this looks like? And there's no wrong answers here. Can we just like maybe throw into the chat some words that might describe the movement that these women are doing? Right, they just walked into a circle, so they did a formation change from a line into a circle. What are they doing with their feet right now? No wrong answers here, because you guys are just making up your own words, yeah. And what do you see them doing with their hands? And then, that was a happy accident with the real audio. I'm gonna scooch us forward. Here we go. Let's come back to the chat. All right. So, stomping, clapping. Yes, stomping and clapping. And they're patting their legs, exactly. They're using their hands to make beats off their body. You guys are getting better and better, yes. And they're stamping too, yes. They're clapping. They're slapping their thighs. They are, what's this movement right here? Somebody said it earlier in class. There's a term that we use for it. Yes, that's right, dab. And then what are some other things that we saw? They also extended their leg out, right? This is kind of my favorite move right here. I'm going to see if I can freeze frame it. Boom! Oh, no. I'm not getting enough grace from YouTube here. But this kick out to the side, whoosh, is pretty awesome. So this style of dance, do you guys know what it's called? Because there's like a lot of descriptors here on the page. Got any guesses? It's okay to guess. I want to make you guys feel okay at guessing. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to pull up the next video. In fact, to encourage you guessing, can you all invent a name for that style just for the heck of it? I'm going to invent a name that I know is not true.
Well, they were doing like a bunch of like I wouldn't really say tapping because they were more like stomping and stuff. And then like I don't know if this is the term, but like I think in a cartoon show, I think it's like regular show or something where they like pat their bodies and stuff. They call it ham boning.
Yes, actually, that is a real term.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they also did some clapping, so like a mix of those three, just like the
Yeah.
clapping, the ham boning, and then like the stomping and kicks and
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah. So, ham boning is another term that goes in the category of patent juba, which is based on Juba the dancer. Master Juba is what he was called, and we're going to talk a lot about him coming up. But he specialized in buck, jig, and wing dances, and in particular in percussion, and went on tour all over the United States. And so ham bone refers to the fact that you do percussion with an actual ham bone that you're like tapping between your knee and your thigh and your hand. Ham bone. Fun facts. So one of the things, sorry, I didn't press share screen, I just toggled. One of the influences that is a later influence from Africa onto dancing is the gumboot dance. So gumboot comes, I'm going to show it to you first, and then I'm going to kind of like talk over it. I think there's a long intro, actually. Come on, gentlemen. So in South Africa, apartheid, right? And one of the forms of work that was most common for Black people to be forced to do in South Africa was mining. And so the gumboot dance arose as a form of unity building and sort of like expressing your anger and frustration when you couldn't really fight back, as we discussed about the position that the slaves were in last week. So in Africa, when you were a miner, the mine owners provided these rubber boots called gum boots in Africa because the rubber is the gum tree, yes? So the miners, when they couldn't actually protest the work that they were being forced to do, would express their emotion and feel unity together by dancing together, right? So you have the same stomping and clapping that we've seen in other dances, but in this case, they're really utilizing the rubber boots or the gum boots as an extra specific sound. So they're like slapping the rubber and it makes a particular kind of slap sound, and that's part of how this dance form. You notice in the stepping, which is the actual term for that collegiate sport that we were watching in the previous video, they were mostly slapping their thighs. And in gumboot dance, because they're trying to slap the leather of the boots or the rubber of the boots, the slaps are all quite low. Not all of them, but it's part of it. I love that their classmates are giggling about them right now. So another thing we're going to talk about a lot later on are 5 Africanist elements, and these are 5 things about African movement or Africanist movement, which means evolved from dances in Africa or movement in Africa, are polycentrism and polyrhythm. And so, let me see, go back here a second. You can hear how these dancers are making a rhythm, right? Dun 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 dun. So that would be a rhythm. And then in the beginning here, they started with a more simple rhythm. and they're adding on to that rhythm. So the idea of polyrhythm, as it sounds like, is multiple rhythms happening at the same time. So here they're starting with just the plain stomp. Just a hot second earlier. And you can hear that the first rhythm is just the straight 4 on the floor, as we normally call it. Stomp, 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 right? And that's like what makes all pop music pop music. But then you can hear the second rhythm that is begun by the young man who is calling the second rhythm. And on top of the 4 on the floor, he says, "Jai, jai, jai." I'm going to let him do it because he does it better than me. So you can hear how he calls in the second rhythm, and then that adds in the third rhythm of stamp down. So the first rhythm of 1, 2, 3, 4 is still happening the whole time. And the second rhythm is slap stomp. So for your you don't have to turn it in homework today. I encourage you to all just try that stomp. You can even do it sitting on your chair, right? And you notice when I'm trying to do it and failing at it, I'm failing because when I slap, it slows down the rhythm of my feet on the floor. Whereas I should be keeping that rhythm even the whole time. Yeah? So having those are examples of 2 rhythms happening at the same time. And as the dance gets more complex, you can hear that the original rhythm is still happening, but they might be adding a secondary rhythm with just their hands against their boots or against their legs, even while the first rhythm is happening. And that is a polyrhythm. Yes? Does that make sense, polyrhythm? Ooh, I see some chat questions. Let me check back in. Yes. The video that we watched before this was, in fact, step dancing from a fraternity. You are absolutely correct, Adriana. Yeah. Okay, let's peel back to our course page for a moment. And I will bring you with me. Let's just roll down what we're up to this week. Okay. So we finished this. I hope all of you, especially those of you who are catching up because you were late ads, remember you can turn anything in until the available date. So do please. I think all of you got done with everything that was happening in this registration module O here, or module 0 here. But make sure that's all turned in because ad date is coming, or the census date is coming up, and I have to drop anybody who hasn't done their first couple of assignments. Yeah. But I think in this class, you guys might all be pretty good, except for the folks who just added. So we went over defining dance history, family tree. We talked about hybrid versus fusion. We said hello to each other. And then we started to talk about how freestyling becomes choreography and dance vocabulary last week. We've been talking in our discussion a little bit about both things because we really spent time talking about appropriation last week. Which was going to be a discussion for this week, but I wanted to follow it last week. So illegal percussion, colonialism, slavery, that is more of the stuff that we're talking about just right now. And then we talked a little bit today about how perspective from a different culture can layer a moral judgment that really sticks onto movement. So in the reading about the new Jim Crow, we were learning about the way that laws, and we talked today about laws that were antebellum, so pre-Civil War, in the Jim Crow era, which is a time period where after Civil War ended, slavery ended, and we had this really great moment in history called Reconstruction, where like more Black men, especially in the South, took political leadership roles than ever before, and we might not have even matched that moment since then, which is sad. Let's do better, America. At the end of Reconstruction, which was delineated by the Northern armies pulling out of the South and stopping to protect the rights of African Americans, there was a rebound and the Jim Crow laws were enacted. And those laws were things like you can't be unemployed, you can't be hanging around if you're unemployed, which were laws that were specifically designed to be mixed with the laws about segregation in order that you could persecute and essentially re-enslave Black people by it, like arresting a Black man for hanging around. Maybe he came to visit his auntie and he doesn't have a job in that town, and he would get arrested on the street and then put to work building the highways in the South. This is real history, even though it sounds hard to believe for those of us who haven't been made aware of it before. So that's what that Alexander article is about. And then talking now more about categories of community dances. So we're looking at how those community dances start to evolve through time and discussing dance elements. So the last thing for today I want to cover is this idea of Laban's dance elements, most of which are pretty obvious, but it's good to say body is about the body in question or the bodies. So if I were dancing a duet with someone else, body would refer to both of us, or if it's a group of 10, you'd have 10 people. And what shapes do those bodies make? In that step video we watched, it started with all of the dancers in a row, and then they stepped back into a circle formation, right? All facing out. Let me just pull this up as our visual while we talk about it. Go, 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 internet. Space would be how the groups move, so formation changes. So if you're talking about body, and you could talk about moving just the head or moving the head and the hand. Look, there's an example of polycentrism. Two centers of my bodies are working at the same time, but in different rhythms, in different directions. Space would be that whole movement of the group. Yeah, diagonal lines, if they're traveling in a path, or if they're going straight across the stage horizontally. If you're moving in depth, that would be towards your audience or away from your audience. So this is depth. But sometimes when we're watching videos, we confuse depth with vertical movement. Vertical movement is up and down. So like if you're doing floor work versus squatting versus jumping, that's vertical movement. And depth is towards and away from your audience. Horizontal movement to the left and right. That's pretty obvious. Another thing that dancers often use is your focus and the way that you're looking as a performer. So if I'm looking directly into the audience's eyes, it can feel more direct in communication and intention. But if I look off into the future, into the distance there, the audience's eyes tend to look for what I'm looking for. All right, so dynamics, time and effort. Time has to do with the rhythms that you're using, whether you're moving slowly or if you're moving quickly. If it's an even rhythm or if it's an uneven rhythm. Right? Effort can have, it's described here as like energy and quality. So you can look like you're working hard, but not actually be working hard. Like, you know, faux flexing might be a bad example of that. And an opposite example would be when you think about the way the smooth lightness, for example, that Michael Jackson used when he was moonwalking, and it just looked like he was gliding effortlessly backwards. Moonwalking is hard work. Yeah, you have to like push your body secretly with the alternate part of your body. So your whole body is really tense to get that look. The effort is strong, but the look of it, the quality of it looks light. Yeah. I think, and of course you can have both of those things happening at the same time, and that's what this diagram is about. So with that in mind, hopefully we are moving on next with a sense of how dances move from just rocking out with your friends to other versions of rocking out with your friends, or how sometimes someone begins to teach them, and when you're through the act of teaching, you might really settle on specific things that you're teaching, and that can codify whether or not you have a vocabulary that goes with it. It can codify the movement, it can set the movement, and that's how you get from freestyling to set choreography. Like if you want a group to dance together in sync, you can't be freestyling. You have to be doing a series of set steps in a series of orders. Even if your dancers are doing two different things at the same time, they might be doing that on purpose, and that is set choreography. 2, 3, yes. Okay, and then we're gonna move on from here to the next section. So I'm gonna let you guys go today. I would love to hear if you have more questions about anything, either how race is playing into our judgment of dancing, how dances are taught across community. I'm just sort of like reviewing the big ideas that we've covered. How laws affect movement, how movement is a form of activism, and some vocabulary words that we're talking about in terms of how simple steps that we're going to see repeated in different formats and different styles can be identified verbally. Okay. Any questions? I'm going to rush off to my next class unless you guys have questions. Yeah? Oh, it's okay. It's recorded, Ned. We'll see you later next time. If we're all good, then I'm going to go to my next class. Any closing remarks? Let's do a little checkout. Check out. Thank you guys. That is the last thing that I need to say is thank you for being here. I really appreciate you being here. And I will see you next week. Yes. By the way, if you guys are looking for the recording and it's not on YouTube, then it's definitely in your Zoom. You go down to recordings or over to cloud recordings, and they're all recorded there for sure. Or you can look in Panopto, which has automatic closed captioning and is searchable even, which is cool. They should be there.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for being late.
Yeah.
But I was watching on the YouTube live stream while I was driving.
I'm not live streaming today.
You did not?
No, you might have been watching an old one, which
I was watching an old one thinking.
Yeah, so go ahead and look through the Zoom recording for this one. You can catch up.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye. Bye, Keon.